My stepbrother siphoned $95,000 from my college trust fund to chase his Broadway dream. A decade later, he was flat broke. When my parents called, pleading for him, I locked the door. The name is Clara Sterling, and I'm a 33-year-old female physician specializing in family medicine, running my own successful practice right outside Seattle, Washington. But 10 years ago, I was a 17-year-old girl whose entire future was hijacked by a mother and stepfather who genuinely believed musical theater was a more vital pursuit than medical school. Here's the breakdown. My mother, Eleanor, married my stepfather, Vance, when I was 13. He brought along his 16-year-old son, Jax, who quickly became the golden child of our suburban Bellevue household. Jax was a wannabe star who spent every waking moment belting out show tunes and perfecting his jazz hands in the hallway mirror. I'll admit, the kid had solid vocal chops. However, he also had the work ethic of a sloth and the ego of a rock star. Vance was one of those overly compensating divorced dads, constantly hyping Jax's artistic vision and predicting his imminent takeover of Broadway. Every single conversation, regardless of the initial topic, circled back to Jax's latest audition or community theater performance. Meanwhile, I was quietly earning straight A's in my AP chemistry and physics classes, volunteering at Harborview Medical Center, and meticulously charting my course to medical school. The bias was so blatant, it was often absurd. Vance's reaction to my acceptance into the National Honor Society was, "That's great, sweetie. Did you hear Jax landed the lead in the school production of Grease?" When I scored in the 97th percentile on my PSATs, Eleanor offered a weak smile and immediately changed the subject to Jax needing new professional headshots for his portfolio. Jax reveled in the spotlight. He would actually break into song during dinner. Not kidding. We could be discussing who needed to buy more milk, and he'd suddenly launch into a flawless rendition of Gethsemane from Jesus Christ Superstar, treating us like his captive audience. Vance would beam with over-the-top pride, while I sat there wondering if this was what the onset of a migraine felt like. The true sting was in the allocation of attention and resources. My award-winning science fair projects received a passing, "Very nice, dear." Jax's small-scale performances, even as a chorus member, required the entire family to attend, complete with flowers, celebratory dinners, and glowing reviews. I once took first place in the regional math Olympiad. Vance's only comment was that we needed to leave early because Jax had a late-night costume fitting. I vividly recall one incident during my junior year that perfectly encapsulated our family dynamic. I'd spend months working on a complex research project investigating pollution levels in local Puget Sound tributaries. I was clocking weekends in a University of Washington lab, conducting rigorous fieldwork, and presented findings that earned me a recommendation for a state-level science fair. That same week, Jax auditioned for a regional theater's summer production of Chicago. I learned I had secured second place at state, a major accomplishment that guaranteed interviews for top undergraduate programs. Jax received a callback, not the part, just a callback. Guess which achievement dominated family dinner discussions for the next 4 weeks? Vance actually printed out the callback email and framed it on the kitchen counter. My state science medal ended up tossed in a box in my closet. I assumed college would be my escape. I was saving every dollar from my part-time job at the local CVS pharmacy, working 3 shifts during the week and long weekend hours. The work was tedious, stocking, ringing up transactions, dealing with confused customers. But every single paycheck went directly into my college savings account. More importantly, Eleanor had always promised that my trust fund would cover the bulk of my education.
This wasn't a vague parental promise. This was a real, legally structured account started by my biological father, Michael Sterling, a forward-thinking structural engineer who died in a car accident when I was 8. Michael had established an education fund that grew steadily through smart investments. By my senior year, the spring of 2015, it had grown to nearly $95,000. Not enough for Yale Medical School, perhaps, but more than enough to get me through undergrad debt-free and establish a solid platform for medical school applications. My entire future was planned. 4 years of pre-med at Oregon State University, OSU, maintaining a stellar GPA, crushing the MCATs, getting into Oregon Health and Science University, OHSU, completing residency, and eventually becoming Dr. Clara Sterling. That is where I made my fatal mistake. I assumed that money set aside by my deceased father exclusively for my education was mine. The atomic bomb dropped in early April of my senior year, right when I was comparing acceptance letters and preparing to commit to OSU. Eleanor knocked on my door with the syrupy, falsely sweet voice she always used right before delivering devastating news. It was the same tone she'd used when she told me we couldn't afford the senior class trip to New York City, or that I wouldn't get a car for my 16th birthday due to financial constraints.
"Honey, we need to talk about college," she began. I braced myself, expecting a discussion about dorm room colors or my summer class schedule. I was tragically wrong. "Your stepfather and I have been talking, and we've decided to redirect your college fund toward Jax's professional career development." I stared at her as if she had suddenly started speaking ancient Sumerian. The words refused to connect. Redirect? What does that even mean? "Well, Jax got accepted into that intensive summer program at the Juilliard School in New York. And then there's the year-long conservatory in Manhattan. This is his moment, Clara, his one chance to truly break into the industry." The words felt like a physical gut punch. That's my college fund. Michael Sterling left that money for my education. Eleanor's face hardened, adopting the defensive mask she wore when she knew she was being deeply unfair, but was determined to hold her ground. "Vance is your father now, and we make decisions as a family. Jax's dreams are just as important as yours." Jax's dreams? I nearly choked on the absurdity. I'm going to become a doctor. I'm going to save lives. He wants to prance around in tights singing show tunes. "Don't be so dramatic. There will be other ways for you to go to college. Jax's window is closing. He needs to strike while the iron is hot." Strike while the iron is hot. This was about a 20-year-old who had never held a real job, never paid a single bill, and whose biggest professional milestone was being cast as ensemble member number 3 in a high school production of Oklahoma. "You can take out student loans like everyone else," Vance chimed in from the doorway, having clearly been eavesdropping. "It's a character-building experience. Jax's artistic development can't wait." Character building, right. Because working 3 jobs to pay for medical school while Jax lived in Greenwich Village pursuing his art was precisely what Michael Sterling intended when he established that account. I used every logical argument I could muster. The money came from my father, not Vance. I had genuine professional goals with clear earning potential, while Jax was chasing a pure pipe dream in an industry where 92% of actors are frequently unemployed. Medical school was astronomically expensive and hyper-competitive. I needed that financial baseline to have a serious chance at success.
Nothing worked. Vance had successfully convinced Eleanor that Jax was the family's best long-term investment. their lottery ticket to fame and fortune. One hit show on Broadway, and he'll be set for life, he'd said repeatedly. Meanwhile, doctors are a dime a dozen. This coming from a man who owned a chain of Valvoline instant oil change franchises and thought changing your transmission fluid was the peak of automotive sophistication. The conversation went in circles for over 3 hours. Vance focused on return on investment and fostering artistic genius. Eleanor kept insisting this was simply what families do, and that I was selfish for not prioritizing Jax's needs. I kept emphasizing that this was factually theft, taking money earmarked for one person's education and giving it to someone else entirely. Vance finally dropped the ultimate blow. The decision has already been made. We spoke to the financial advisor on March 28th and started the transfer process. Jax's program starts in early June, so we had to move quickly. They hadn't consulted me, hadn't asked my opinion, and had already begun funneling my inheritance toward Jax's fantasy before even informing me. The worst part was Jax's reaction when they told him. The kid didn't even fake a flicker of guilt. He immediately began researching apartments in Midtown and casually discussing how he'd thank the family in his Tony Award acceptance speech. "Don't worry, Clara," he said with a patronizing smile that made me want to shatter the nearest vase. "When I make it big, I'll totally help pay for your medical school. Think of this as an investment in both our futures." An investment in my Broadway dreams using my deceased father's money. I locked myself in my room for the rest of the day, alternating between searing rage and deep, crushing depression. Everything I had worked for, every strategy I had created, every small sacrifice I had made was predicated on that trust fund. Without it, medical school went from difficult to nearly impossible. That summer was a brutal wake-up call. While Jax was living it up at Juilliard, posting glossy Instagram stories from trendy Manhattan coffee shops and networking events, I was working extra shifts at the pharmacy and applying for every scholarship, grant, and loan imaginable. The financial aid office at OSU became my second home. Miss Evans, my high school guidance counselor, a kind woman who was silently furious on my behalf, guided me through the maze of paperwork. "There are options," she explained. A pile of applications for merit, need-based aid, and loan forms spread across her desk. "It won't be easy, but it's doable."
What she left unsaid was that it would be immeasurably harder than it should have been. Students with family support can focus on their academics and activities. Students like me would have to work 35 hours a week just to stay afloat. I pieced together a financial aid package that covered about 65% of my expenses. Academic scholarships covered a portion, need-based aid helped with housing, but there was a significant shortfall. The rest came from working nights at a 24-hour diner near campus called the Cascade Grill, serving coffee and late-night sandwiches to exhausted night shifters and drunk college students from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 3 nights a week. My freshman year schedule looked sadistic. Classes all day, a quick study session, job starting at 11 p.m. I survived on stale diner pastries and whatever free coffee I could siphon from the machine. My grades suffered initially. I managed a 3.4 GPA, not bad, but nowhere near the 3.9 I was targeting. It's hard to perform academically when you're chronically sleep-deprived, and your biggest meal is often a protein bar eaten between lectures. But I adapted. I formed study groups that met in the pre-dawn hours. I built strong relationships with professors during office hours when others were socializing. I discovered that medical school admissions committees secretly valued candidates who had worked their way through school. It demonstrated a determination and work ethic that the trust fund kids couldn't match. Jax's updates from New York became increasingly sparse and vague. The Juilliard summer went well, but the year-long conservatory was reportedly more challenging than expected. His Instagram posts shifted from artistic breakthroughs to complaints about the competitiveness of the New York theater scene, the crushing cost of rent, and the difficulty of standing out among so many talented performers. Vance constantly made excuses during our bi-weekly family calls. He's finding his voice. The New York hustle is tough. He just needs more time to establish himself. Jax genuinely needed a job, but it seemed to be beneath his artistic dignity. When I spoke to him directly, he moaned about auditions that yielded no callbacks, expensive classes that didn't pay off, and the general unfairness of life as an aspiring artist in the Big Apple. By my sophomore year, I found my stride. Better time management led to better grades. I raised my GPA to 3.7. The diner work was still grueling, but I had been promoted to shift manager, which meant slightly better pay and more predictable hours. I also began tutoring other students in organic chemistry, which was more lucrative than restaurant work and looked fantastic on med school applications. Jax, meanwhile, had moved from his relatively plush midtown apartment to a shared, cramped space in Bushwick, Brooklyn. The updates from New York slowed down significantly, and when he did post, it was more about the struggle of being an artist than the triumphs. Junior year brought both progress and a problem. I started volunteering at the campus health center, gaining invaluable clinical experience. Dr. Patel, the coordinator, became a fantastic mentor, helping me navigate the admissions process and eventually writing one of my strongest letters of recommendation.
But junior year also brought the news that Jax was coming home. After 3 years and the total depletion of most of my college savings, the New York experiment was officially over. He was 23, broke, and moving back into his childhood bedroom as if nothing had happened. Vance framed it as a strategic retreat to recharge and bring key industry insights back to the local market. What it really meant was that Jax had blown $95,000 of my inheritance and had zero to show for it, but stories about auditions he didn't land and connections that went nowhere. Family gatherings were unbearable. Jax would hold court, regaling everyone with tales from his time in the industry, name-dropping actors he'd met for 5 minutes at networking events. Meanwhile, I was working 16-hour days, classes, work, volunteering, preparing for the MCATs, while everyone was absorbed in Jax's stories from the Big Apple. Senior year was a whirlwind. Medical school applications, MCAT prep, maintaining grades, and working enough to cover basic living costs. I took the MCATs twice. The first score was decent, but not competitive enough. After months of studying with borrowed books and free online resources, the second attempt was significantly better. Medical school interviews were their own special type of torture. Professional attire was beyond my budget. Travel expenses ate into my already tight grocery money. The pressure of competing with applicants whose parents had paid for pricey test prep classes and application consultants was immense. But somehow, it worked. I was accepted into OHSU, my dream school, a phenomenal reputation and manageable in-state tuition. Not a full scholarship, but manageable with loans and the part-time medical scribe work I planned to do. 4 years later, I graduated from OSU with a 3.9 GPA in biochemistry. Not bad for someone who had been working 25 to 30 hours a week throughout college and subsisting on ramen noodles and day-old diner food. Medical school was even harder without a financial safety net. While others focused solely on academics, I worked weekends as a medical scribe at urgent care clinics, tutored undergrads in organic chemistry, and conducted research for faculty members who paid low graduate assistant wages for data analysis. The student loans were crushing. Every semester brought new promissory notes, ballooning debt totals, and projections for how long it would take to pay everything back. By graduation in late June 2023, I owed approximately $280,000. Manageable for a physician's salary, perhaps, but still a monumental debt that would follow me for decades. Throughout medical school, I kept tabs on Jax through social media and family gossip. He had taken a job at a music store in Bothell, was occasionally performing in local community theater shows, and was still living at home with Eleanor and Vance, talking about his music career as if he were merely between major professional opportunities. The difference was staggering. I was learning to diagnose cardiac arrests and deliver babies, working 80-hour clinical rotation weeks, preparing to save lives and make a tangible contribution to society. Jax was selling guitar picks and auditioning for the local dinner theater production of Mamma Mia. I graduated with honors and began my residency in family medicine at Swedish Medical Center, Seattle. 3 years of punishing schedules, overnight calls, ED rotations, and learning to manage everything from checkups to life-threatening emergencies. I loved it. Every demanding case, every complex diagnosis, every patient I helped, it all felt worthwhile.
During residency, the family updates grew more troubling. Jax had been laid off from the music store and was now working part-time at Guitar Center, still living at home and chasing the dream. He was nearing 30 with no real career prospects or life skills. Vance's health was deteriorating due to high stress, a terrible diet, and what appeared to be untreated hypertension and cardiac issues he continually dismissed. Eleanor was working part-time as a dental receptionist, barely earning enough to support 3 adults, since Jax contributed almost nothing to household expenses. I completed residency and opened my own family medicine practice in a lovely Issaquah suburb, slowly building a patient base and finally earning a real, substantial income for the first time in my adult life. The practice flourished, assisting families, caring for children and seniors. I was the type of doctor who truly listens and takes time with each person. My student loans were finally manageable on a physician's salary. I rented a small house with a garden, bought a reliable Subaru, and began to genuinely plan a life instead of just existing until the next exam or loan payment. Jax, meanwhile, was 31 years old, still in his boyhood bedroom, still working retail part-time, occasionally posting on Facebook about impending projects that never materialized. Then the call came. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, I was reviewing patient charts when Eleanor called, sobbing uncontrollably. Vance had been experiencing crushing chest pains for several weeks, but had ignored them. He finally collapsed at the Valvoline during the morning shift and was rushed to the hospital. He suffered a massive myocardial infarction, she wailed into the phone, relaying the message from the attending physician. The doctors say he needs emergency surgery, multiple bypasses, and they want to keep him in the ICU for at least a week. My medical training immediately took over. I calmly asked about the symptoms, the timeline, and the cardiologist's prognosis and treatment options. I began mentally calculating recovery time, likely complications, and the level of follow-up care he would require. "How much is this going to cost?" I asked, already knowing the answer would be devastating. That's when the real crisis emerged. Vance's insurance through his franchise provided only catastrophic coverage, a high deductible, a narrow network, and the kind of plan that works fine for routine care, but bankrupts you when anything serious happens. They were looking at around $210,000 in hospital bills, assuming a perfect recovery with no setbacks. Vance's plan would likely cover only about 35% after the deductible was met. Eleanor was panicking in the way people do when they've never faced true financial peril and suddenly realized they might lose everything. They had no savings. Vance had spent the majority of his salary supporting Jax's lifestyle and numerous professional development expenses. A few years prior, Vance had taken out a reverse mortgage on the house to fund an unsuccessful franchise expansion. They were essentially ruined.
"We don't know what to do," Eleanor confessed, her voice cracking. "We thought, maybe since you're a doctor now?" There it was. I had been expecting that phrase for years. "You want me to help with the medical bills?" "It's not that we expect you to pay everything," she said quickly, obviously realizing how mercenary that sounded. "But maybe you could talk to the doctors, work something out. Help us figure out payment plans or charity care options. Help them make payment arrangements with the money I earned while working my tail off through medical school, while they used my inheritance to fund Jax's Manhattan experience." "I'll think about it," I told her, the most non-committal response I could manage. That evening, I sat in my living room, the first place I had ever been able to afford to decorate nicely, and genuinely debated what to do. A part of me felt a tug of empathy. Despite everything, Vance wasn't a monster. He was simply a father who had made profoundly bad decisions out of a desire to support his son. Eleanor had been weak rather than evil, allowing Vance to convince her that pouring money into Jax's aspirations was more crucial than protecting my future. But every time I started to feel sorry for their situation, I recalled being in that 24-hour diner at 2 a.m. during medical school, studying anatomy while pouring coffee for drunken frat boys, because I couldn't afford to study full-time like my classmates who were supported by their parents. I remembered eating instant ramen for dinner 4 nights a week because that was all I could afford after paying for textbooks and lab fees. I remembered the constant, grinding stress of loan applications, scholarship essays, and the exhaustion of working and studying simultaneously, all while Jax posted Instagram stories from swanky Lower East Side cocktail bars. The next morning, I drove to my childhood home for the first time in 3 years. The house looked exactly the same from the outside, except for Jax's car in the driveway, a respectable Honda Civic that probably cost more than I had spent on food during my entire 4 years of medical school. The lawn needed mowing, and the trim paint was peeling, but it was the same unremarkable suburban home where I grew up.
I knocked and waited. Jax answered, looking as if he had just woken up, despite it being 11 a.m. He still had that entitled, oblivious expression, though it flickered slightly when he saw me standing there. "Oh, hey, Clara. Mom's at the hospital with Vance." "I know. I came to see you." He let me in, and I glanced around the living room. The furniture was the same, and the walls were covered in family photos, including several framed prints of Jax from various stage shows over the years. I noticed, as always, that my own academic achievements were completely absent. "This is really scary, you know," Jax said, settling dramatically onto the couch, as if initiating a deep therapeutic session. "Vance is, really sick, and the money situation is totally screwed." "Yeah, I heard. What are you doing to help?" He looked genuinely baffled by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what are you doing to help with the medical bills? You're 31 years old, you live here rent-free, they've supported your career attempts for over a decade. What's your plan for getting them through this financial crisis?" Jax shifted uncomfortably, clearly unaccustomed to being asked to assume responsibility for anything. "I mean, I'm working at Guitar Center. I don't exactly have medical bill money just lying around, right?" but you could get a second job, or maybe a better full-time job that actually utilizes that expensive training they paid for you to get. It's not that simple. I'm still pursuing my music career. I can't just abandon everything I've worked for. Everything you'd worked for with my college fund? The sheer audacity was breathtaking. Jax, what happened to the $95,000? What do you mean? My college fund. The $95,000 from my father that was supposed to pay for my education. Where did it go?
He had the decency to look deeply uncomfortable. That was like years ago, Clara. It went to my training, living expenses in New York, networking opportunities, an investment in my future, right? And what return did they get on that investment? The silence stretched between us. Jax picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion, suddenly mesmerized by the upholstery pattern. "Look," he finally mumbled, "I know you're probably still mad about the college thing, but that worked out fine. You're a doctor now. You made it work." I made it work by taking on $280,000 in student debt and working 3 jobs throughout medical school. You made it work by spending my dead father's money on acting classes and Manhattan rent. That's not fair. Marianne and Vance made that decision as parents. I didn't force them to do anything. No, but you certainly didn't object to it either. And you didn't exactly rush to pay it back when your Broadway dreams didn't pan out. Jax stood up and paced toward the window, as people often do when cornered by an undeniable truth. "What do you want me to say, Clara? I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry it happened that way, but I can't change the past. And Vance is sick now. This is bigger than old family drama." You're right. This is bigger than old family drama. This is about accountability. I dug into my purse and pulled out a CD, not a burned disc with a handwritten label. This was professionally manufactured, with glossy artwork and shrink wrap. Jax's eyes widened when he saw it. "Where did you get that?" "Your MySpace page from 2017. Remember? You spent about $4,000 of my college fund getting these demo CDs professionally produced. You posted about it constantly, how this was going to be your breakthrough, how record labels would hear your talent and rush to offer contracts." Jax's face flushed crimson. That was a different phase of my career. I'm more focused on live performance now, right? Well, I bought a copy off eBay, figured it was the least I could do since I technically helped pay for it. I set the CD on the coffee table between us and walked toward the door. Jax scrambled after me. "Clara, wait, what are you doing? Are you going to help with Vance's bills or not?"
I paused at the threshold, looking at this 31-year-old man who still lived in his childhood room, had squandered my fortune on a failed ambition, and was now pleading with me to rescue the very family who had sacrificed my future for his own. I'm going to help exactly as much as this family helped me get through medical school. What does that mean? It means you should probably start checking the couch cushions for spare change. Maybe sell some of those professional headshots from your portfolio. That evening, Eleanor called again. Vance's surgery had gone well, but he would be in the hospital for at least a week. The bills were already accumulating, and they had received an estimate for the full treatment cost, $170,000. Not counting follow-up and rehab. "Did you talk to Jax?" "I did. Interesting conversation. He's still living the dream, apparently." "Clara, please, I know you're angry about the college fund situation, but this is life or death. Vance could die if he doesn't get proper follow-up care." "Eleanor, Vance is going to get proper follow-up care. That's how hospitals work in America. They don't just let heart surgery patients die over billing disputes. But the debt will destroy us. We'll lose the house. We don't know what to do. I took a deep breath, trying to strike the perfect balance between honesty and calculated cruelty. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to talk to the hospital's financial counselor about payment plans. Every major hospital has them. You're going to apply for charity care programs. Most hospitals have sliding scale assistance for people who can't afford treatment. And Jax is going to get a second job, or maybe his first real job, and contribute to household expenses so you can focus on paying medical bills. But Jax's career is working retail part-time and occasionally performing in community theater. He is 31 years old. It is time to be realistic about his prospects and his responsibilities to this family. You could just help us. You're a doctor. You make good money now. There it was, the entitlement that had defined my entire childhood, the belief that my success was somehow shared property, while Jax's failures were merely temporary setbacks requiring further investment. You're right. I do make good money. I make good money because I worked my tail off to get through medical school without family support. I make good money because I spent 4 years eating ramen noodles and working nights, while my classmates went to study groups funded by parents who could afford to support their children's education. I make good money because I graduated with a mountain of debt that I'm still paying off. We did what we thought was best at the time. You did what was convenient for your new husband and his son. You sacrificed my future to fund Jax's fantasy, and now you want me to rescue you from the consequences of that decision. It wasn't a fantasy. Jax is talented. Eleanor, Jax is a 31-year-old man living in his childhood bedroom, working part-time at Guitar Center, whose biggest accomplishment in a decade is a demo CD that no record label ever bothered to listen to. Meanwhile, I'm actually helping people, saving lives, and contributing to society in meaningful ways. Which one of us turned out to be the better investment? She was silent for a long, agonizing moment. So you won't help? I'm not giving you money, if that's what you're asking, but I'll give you something better. I'll give you the exact same thing you gave me when I needed support for my education. Advice, to figure it out on your own, and good luck making it work. That's cruel. No, Eleanor, cruel is taking a teenager's college fund, money specifically left by deceased father for her education, and giving it to your stepson for acting classes. What I'm doing is justice. I hung up and blocked their number. The next few months were surprisingly peaceful. I focused on my practice, which was rapidly expanding as word spread about the new family doctor who truly listened and took time for her patients. I had begun specializing in preventative care and chronic illness management, finding deep satisfaction in helping patients stay healthy rather than just addressing catastrophes. 2 weeks later, my cousin Felicity called. She had heard about Vance's ordeal and my refusal to help through the family grapevine and wanted to hear my side. Because what I'm hearing from Eleanor doesn't sound like the Clara I know, she explained delicately. I recounted everything. The college fund theft, Jax's failed career sponsored by my inheritance, the years of blatant favoritism, and their current expectation that I would protect them from the fallout of their own actions. Felicity was quiet for a beat after I finished. Wow, Clara, I had no idea about the college fund thing. That's incredibly messed up. Yeah, well, water under the bridge now. Is it though? I mean, how do you feel about how this is all playing out? I considered the question carefully. You know what? I'm actually at peace with it. I spent years being furious about what they did to me, but building my career, proving I could succeed without their support, that's been incredibly satisfying. Now they need help and they're finding out what it feels like when family doesn't come through for the important stuff. What about Vance, though? I mean, he could actually have complications.
Vance isn't going to die, Felicity. They'll work out payment plans with the hospital, maybe qualify for charity care programs. They'll figure something out, the way millions of Americans do every year. Hospitals have entire departments dedicated to helping people navigate these situations. But they'll have to do it themselves, and maybe they'll learn what it's like to struggle financially for something important, like I did for 8 years. Felicity understood. She had witnessed the family dynamics over the years, but had never realized the magnitude of the betrayal. A month later, I learned through the family network that Vance had been discharged and was recovering well at home. They had qualified for the hospital's charity care program, which covered roughly 60% of the costs. The remaining bills were set up on a 10-year payment plan with a low interest rate. More importantly, Jax had secured a second job, working evenings at a call center. He continued to live at home, but was now contributing to household expenses for the first time in his adult life. Apparently, the financial crisis had served as a stark wake-up call regarding the realistic prospects for his music career. Eleanor had returned to work full-time as a dental receptionist, her first full-time position in years. They were getting by, but there was no extra money for Jax's artistic ambitions or professional advancement. Jax contacted me personally 6 months after Vance's surgery, via text message rather than through Eleanor or other family members. "Hey, Clara, I know things have been weird between us, but I wanted to reach out. Vance's recovery is going really well, and I've been thinking a lot about what you said about accountability and responsibility. I got a better job, assistant manager at a music store downtown, not just retail sales. Still doing music stuff on weekends, but treating it more like a hobby now instead of expecting it to pay the bills. Anyway, I wanted to say I'm sorry about the college fund."
It was the first sincere apology I had ever received from him. Not perfect, not fully comprehensive, but honest and specific, unlike the typical non-apologies I had gotten from my family. I replied simply, "Thanks for saying that, Jax. I'm glad Vance is doing better and that you're taking more responsibility. That means a lot." That was it. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no forced return to family dinners, just a sense of quiet closure that felt far more valuable than coerced forgiveness. Another 6 months passed. My practice continued to grow. I had hired a nurse practitioner to help manage the patient load and had finally paid off my undergraduate student loans. I still had the medical school debt, but it was manageable and steadily shrinking. I was at my office late one evening, finishing patient files and insurance paperwork, when I received a call from an unknown local number. "Dr. Sterling, this is Vance." My stepfather's voice was different, softer and more tentative than I remembered from childhood. "Hi, Vance. How are you feeling?" "Much better. The cardiologist says I'm ahead of schedule on recovery. Listen, I was wondering if I could take you out for coffee sometime. There are some things I'd like to say, and I don't think I can do them justice over the phone." We met the following Saturday at a neutral spot, a small coffee shop near my office. Vance looked older, more tired than I remembered, yet healthier than I expected after major surgery. "I owe you an apology," he began without preamble. "Several apologies, actually. The college fund thing was wrong. Not just misguided or poorly thought out. It was fundamentally wrong. I convinced Eleanor it was the right decision for the family, but it wasn't. That money was meant for your education, specifically set aside by your father for that purpose, and we had no right to redirect it. Why did you do it?"
Vance swirled his coffee for a long time, clearly contemplating how to answer honestly. "Honestly, because I was desperate to prove that supporting Jax's dreams was the right choice. I'd been divorced, felt like I had failed at being a father the first time around, and I wanted to show Jax that I believed in him completely. But I did it at your expense, Clara, and that was inexcusable. What about Jax? Have you talked to him about all this? We've had several long conversations over the past few months. The financial crisis was a wake-up call for him about taking responsibility for his own life instead of expecting other people to fund his dreams. He's been contributing to household expenses, found better employment, and started acting like the adult he should have been years ago. I'm glad he's growing up. Clara, I need you to know Eleanor never stopped feeling guilty about the college fund decision. She talks about it constantly now, how proud she is that you made it through college school and built a successful practice despite our lack of support, how much she regrets listening to me about redirecting that money to Jax. Then why didn't she ever say that to me directly? Pride, I think. And maybe fear that you'd reject the apology or tell us it was too little, too late. Vance reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a promissory note. We can't pay you back the full $95,000 all at once, but we've worked out a budget to repay you over 12 years with interest. It's not enough compensation, and it's not soon enough, but it's what we can realistically manage given our current situation. I unfolded the document and examined it. It was comprehensive and meticulous, including monthly payment amounts, interest calculations, and contingency plans in case their financial status changed. The interest rate was slightly more than what they had to offer. You don't have to do this, Vance. Yes, we do. We stole your inheritance and used it to fund a fantasy. Now, we're going to pay it back, even if it takes until we're both long gone to do it. I folded the paper and slipped it into my purse. Vance, I want you to know I'm not angry anymore. I was for a long time. Furious about what felt like a total betrayal. But building my career on my own terms, proving I could succeed without family support, that actually healed something in me. I'm grateful for the struggle in some ways because it made me stronger and more self-reliant. That doesn't make what we did right. No, but it makes me who I am today, and I like who I've become. We drank our coffee and talked about less explosive topics. Vance's rehabilitation, my growing practice, and the surprisingly dry Seattle weather. Just a normal chat between two adults who had finally found a way to coexist. If this narrative resonated with you, please consider supporting our channel for more genuine stories of family resilience. Thank you for watching.